Have you ever wondered why that nameless tightness in your chest greets you each morning, following you like a persistent shadow throughout the day? This sensation lacks clear origin. It doesn't stem from a specific tragedy, recent loss, or identifiable trauma. It's something more subtle and, for that very reason, more devastating. It's the weight of existing in an era where pretending everything's fine has become an essential skill for social survival. We live immersed in a culture that has transformed vulnerability into shame. We learned from childhood that showing fragility signals weakness, that crying marks failure, that admitting we don't know what we're doing with our lives is almost a crime against productivity and success. The result is a silent epidemic of people drowning in shallow waters, suffering from things they can't even name. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this reality with the force of someone unafraid to stare into the abyss. For him, suffering isn't a system malfunction. It's the system working perfectly. Human life eternally oscillates between two inescapable poles, need and boredom. When we're not desperately chasing something we lack, we're bored and dissatisfied with what we've already conquered. There's no middle ground, no permanent comfort zone. This constant oscillation between wanting and having, between seeking and finding, between desiring and possessing, keeps us in perpetual agitation. What we call happiness is nothing more than brief intervals between pains, ephemeral moments when thirst stops and we notice we're not suffering. But this pause is illusory. Soon restlessness returns, bringing new desires, new lacks, new forms of dissatisfaction. Our modern society has intensified this dynamic perversely. Social media constantly bombards us with evidence of others' happiness, successes, achievements, perfect trips, ideal relationships, sculpted bodies, apparently problem-free lives. This continuous exposure to others' performative happiness amplifies our own sense of inadequacy and failure. We've created an entire generation that learned to transform suffering into memes, pain into jokes, anguish into content for digital consumption. We prefer being seen as cynical and ironic rather than admitting we're lost and afraid. We've developed a sophisticated capacity to use humor as a shield, protecting ourselves from the need to look directly at our own fragility. Fyodor Dostoevsky created the most precise portrait of this condition in his Underground Man, a figure who hides his pain behind mordant irony, who criticizes everything and everyone because he can't bear the idea of honestly examining his own interior. This character represents our era with frightening precision, a civilization that learned to intellectualize suffering to avoid truly feeling it. How many times have we used sarcasm to avoid a real conversation about our fears? How many times have we said, "I'm fine," when we were actually crumbling inside? How many times have we preferred being seen as tough and indifferent rather than revealing our genuine need for connection and understanding? This systematic denial of pain is making us sick in ways we don't even perceive. Anxiety has become epidemic. Depression has become normal. Burnout has gained honor medal status in a culture that confuses exhaustion with productivity. And amid this collective emotional mess, we continue pretending we have everything under control. The body, however, doesn't accept this farce. When the mind refuses to adequately process suffering, the organism takes command. Chronic insomnia, inexplicable headaches, digestive problems, constant muscle tension. All these are ways our biological system finds to scream what our mouth refuses to speak. The body always tells the truth, even when our mind is determined to lie. But there's a revolutionary possibility that our consumerist and superficial culture doesn't want us to discover. What if this pain we carry isn't a defect to be fixed, but raw material to be worked? What if the weight we feel in our chest isn't a problem, but a signal that we're still alive, still feeling, still preserving our essential humanity? The first truly subversive act isn't pretending pain doesn't exist, but looking directly at it and seriously asking, what does this pain want to teach me? When we stop fleeing from our own vulnerability, something extraordinary happens. It stops pursuing us. It doesn't disappear. That would be a childish illusion. but it stops secretly controlling our choices and reactions. Pain we face with courage gradually loses its destructive power over our life. Pain we hide and deny maintains total and invisible power over every decision we make. 2. Pain as a tool for transformation. The fundamental difference between those who fall apart with suffering and those who strengthen through it doesn't lie in the intensity of pain experienced. It lies in how each person chooses to relate to this inevitable experience. Suffering can function as poison or medicine, as prison or liberation. The choice, however difficult to admit, has always been ours. What if we had to live our existence exactly as it is, with all the pains, failures, humiliations, and losses, infinite times? What if each moment of agony had to repeat eternally, without change, without improvement, without escape? Could we look at this imperfect life and still say yes to it? This isn't a question about reincarnation or afterlife. It's a brutal existential test of our capacity to accept the totality of human experience. If we can't embrace our life as it really is, including its painful dimension, then we're not truly living. We're just surviving, in constant flight from ourselves. Schopenhauer was surgical in unmasking our romantic illusions about the possibility of permanent happiness. For him, the idea of a continuously happy life is a childish fantasy that prevents us from dealing with reality. Life is suffering for evolution, not by accident. Recognizing this isn't pessimism. It's the first step toward true freedom. When we accept that suffering is inherent to the current human condition, we stop wasting energy trying to flee the inevitable and begin investing in something much more productive. Transforming our pain into wisdom, our vulnerability into strength, our fragility into genuine compassion. Happiness, when it genuinely happens, is temporary relief from suffering that everyone somehow ends up facing. It's the brief moment when thirst stops and we perceive the absence of pain, but this pause is always ephemeral. Soon restlessness returns, bringing new desires, new lacks, new forms of dissatisfaction, and also new searches for comfort. But there's something infinitely superior to the pursuit of happiness, the construction of meaning. When we stop chasing pleasure and begin building significance through our most difficult experiences, something fundamental transforms in our relationship with life. We don't become happy. Happiness is for amateurs. We become free. Viktor Frankl observed, in his search for meaning, that it wasn't necessarily the physically strongest who managed to survive, but those who maintained a reason to continue existing. Some found this meaning in hope of reuniting with family. Others, in the mission to witness and tell the world what was happening. Still others, simply in the iron determination not to allow their tormentors to destroy their fundamental human dignity. The meaning we construct doesn't eliminate the pain we feel, but transforms it completely. Pain without meaning is just raw and destructive suffering. Pain with meaning is growth, evolution, the chisel that sculpts our most authentic personality. Dostoevsky creates his character Raskolnikov, protagonist of Crime and Punishment, who kills an old usurer because he believes himself beyond common good and evil, above the morality governing ordinary people. He sees himself as a man with the right to decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die. But after the crime, something unexpected happens. Guilt devours him alive. It's precisely this guilt, this unbearable psychological pain, that reconnects him with his lost humanity. He kills like a monster, but suffers like a human being. And it's suffering, not legal punishment, that redeems him. Pain functions as a callback to the human community from which he tried to separate himself through violence. How many times have we tried to place ourselves above the rules governing others? How many times have we acted as if we were too special for the normal consequences of our actions? Pain has an essential function in this dynamic. It constantly reminds us that we're human, not gods, that we're subject to the same emotional and moral laws as everyone else. When we genuinely sit with our pain, without trying to flee to entertainment, excessive work, consumption, or any available form of anesthesia, something extraordinary happens. we begin to hear what it has to tell us. Pain always carries a message. It always points to something that needs to be healed, transformed, or accepted in our life. Pain is the natural and inevitable experience of being human. Trauma is pain that hasn't been processed, that remained frozen in time, that we carry as an open wound that never manages to heal completely. When we flee from pain, it doesn't disappear. It crystallizes into trauma. It stays hidden in the unconscious, controlling our reactions, fears, choices, invisibly and destructively. We think we've forgotten, but our body remembers. We believe we've overcome, but our relationships reveal the contrary. Pain, adequately traversed, on the other hand, transforms into true strength. Not because it stops hurting, but because we learn to carry its weight with dignity, extracting from it all the wisdom it has to offer. 3. Sculpting one's own existence. We live in the era of systematic avoidance. Any discomfort, however minor, can be immediately anesthetized through an infinity of available distractions. Unwanted solitude. Social media offers instant artificial connection. Existential boredom. Streaming platforms provide infinite entertainment. Anxiety about the future. Apps promise quick and painless solutions. We've built an entire civilization dedicated to protecting us from any form of suffering, creating a comfort bubble that isolates us from the fundamental reality of human existence. The result is a generation that hasn't developed capacity to deal with frustration, that panics before the slightest adversity, that confuses natural discomfort with genuine trauma. But there's a devastating problem with this escape strategy. When we avoid all discomfort, we also avoid all real growth. Development always involves tension. Evolution always requires that we leave the comfort zone, that we face fears, that we traverse unknown and potentially painful emotional territories. The happiness our consumerist culture sells is an especially dangerous illusion. It's the happiness of immediate consumption, of social approval on networks, of instant dopamine that lasts the time of a like or an online purchase. This superficial happiness doesn't just fail to fill the existential void, it amplifies it exponentially. Deep down, we know we're fleeing from something essential. We know we're living on the surface while our soul asks for depth, authenticity, real meaning. This unconscious awareness of our own superficiality generates even more anxiety, creating a vicious cycle of flight and dissatisfaction. If God is dead, if we've abandoned our absolute values and traditional structures of meaning, then everything becomes permitted. This isn't a defense of specific religion, but an analysis of what happens when we lose our moral and existential reference points. Contemporary man symbolically killed God, abandoned traditional values, community structures of meaning, rites of passage that gave form and direction to human experience. But we haven't put anything consistent in place of this lost structure. The result is an existential void that no amount of entertainment, consumption, or social approval can adequately fill. When we don't have values worth suffering for, any suffering seems unbearable and meaningless. When we don't have a purpose greater than our own immediate happiness, any frustration becomes personal tragedy. The most necessary revolution of our era isn't technological or political, but existential, the courage to be honest about our real condition. In a world of carefully constructed appearances, radical honesty becomes a genuinely subversive act. This doesn't mean making public drama about our problems or transforming vulnerability into performance for social media. It means having the courage to admit, first to ourselves and then to close people, that we don't always know what we're doing, that sometimes we feel lost, that we carry fears and insecurities like any human being. When we begin conversation with honesty, today I'm facing difficulties and will keep going. Something extraordinary happens. The quality of interaction changes completely, allowing other people to also be truthful, creating authentic connections instead of superficial exchanges of well-constructed facades. The narrative we construct about our own life determines whether we're victims or protagonists of our experience. Two people can go through the same tragedy and emerge completely different. One sees herself as a permanent victim, carrying pain as evidence of cosmic injustice. The other sees herself as a survivor who conquered wisdom through suffering. The difference doesn't lie in the objective facts of what happened, but in the meaning each person chooses to attribute to her experience. And we all have the power, however difficult it may be to exercise, to rewrite our personal narrative. This doesn't mean denying the reality of what happened to us or pretending certain experiences weren't genuinely painful. It means consciously choosing what to do with this pain, deciding whether it will define us as permanent victims or as people who developed strength and wisdom through adversity. There's a fundamental paradox in suffering that our culture doesn't understand. When we stop fleeing from pain, it liberates us. Not because it magically disappears, but because we stop being unconscious slaves to our own fears and wounds. When we accept that pain is an integral part of human experience, we stop wasting energy trying to avoid it and begin investing in learning from it. When we embrace our vulnerability as something natural and universal, we stop depending on external approval to feel valid. Suffering adequately integrated brings a form of freedom that superficial happiness can never offer. The freedom to be authentic, not to depend on external circumstances for our essential well-being, to find meaning and purpose even in the midst of chaos. The definitive proof of existential maturity isn't achieving a perfectly happy life. This is impossible and unnecessary. It's developing the capacity to love the imperfect life we actually have, with all its scars, disappointments, losses, and failures. When we manage to embrace even the part of life that tears and challenges us most deeply, we become truly unbreakable. Not because nothing else can hurt us, that would also be illusion, but because we learn to transform any wound into a source of wisdom and compassion. Sculpting one's own life isn't a project we complete and file away. It's a continuous act of conscious creation, where each day we choose what kind of person we want to become. Each pain we face with courage is an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, more profoundly human. The sculptor never definitively finishes the work. He constantly refines it, discovering new possibilities in the stone he has in hand. We also never finish building ourselves. We spend our entire lives sculpting ourselves, using each experience as a tool, each pain as a chisel that reveals our most authentic form. When we look back, we won't fondly remember the pains we managed to avoid. We'll be proud of those we had courage to face. We won't celebrate moments when we were comfortable and safe. We'll value moments when we found courage to grow, even when that meant traversing unknown and frightening emotional territories. Life is worth it for itself, with all its insoluble contradictions, its ephemeral joys and its sufferings that sometimes seem eternal. Loving this life entirely, especially the part that most challenges and transforms us, is the greatest act of freedom we can perform. And now I ask, what part of your life, the one that most bothers you and that you most try to avoid, might be waiting to be transformed into your greatest source of strength? If this content made you think differently about your own suffering, leave here in the comments which pain you're learning to see as an opportunity for growth. Like the video if it touched something real for you, and subscribe to the channel if you want more reflections that aren't afraid to go deep into the questions that really matter in life.